This video will cover the Illuminated wind deflector installation for the 2016 Plus Camaro Convertible. Before you get started, inspect the contents of the box carefully to be sure you have everything you need for this installation. In addition to the kit contents, you'll need some wire crimpers or pliers and something to run the wire through the panel, either a coat hanger or an actual wire pusher. It'll be useful to review the instructions in their entirety before beginning on the procedure. Assemble the brackets provided in the box on the glass with the feet of the brackets facing inboard. Use this plate and these two screws to mount the brackets to the glass using the Allen wrench provided in the box. During the next few steps, we're going to run power for the wind restrictor by running the wire through the panel and getting power from the fuse panel in the trunk underneath the carpet. If you have the 12-volt adapter plug or the battery pack, those are simply plugged in after you mount the restrictor, and you can skip the following steps. Lower the convertible top and move your front seats forward as much as possible. Okay, before going forward, you're going to want to lean the rear seat down. There's two clips at the very top of the seat behind the cushion you're going to need to press before you can lean the seat down. It's not going to lean down much for you, but it'll be just enough to where you can run the wire behind the seat and through the panel. Okay, this is how the product is going to mount in a future step. We're going to run the female side of the wiring harness from this area back into the trunk and tap it into the fuse panel. This is the side that's going to tap into the fuse panel and the ground. This is the side we're going to run into the rear seat area to plug into the restrictor. This is going to act as a quick disconnect plug if you ever need to remove the screen in the future. Okay, here's another angle of how the product will be mounted in a future step. We want to make sure that the wiring harness with the female connector exits right next to where this mounts, so that the male connector from restrictor can plug right in. Okay, there's two ways to run this harness back into the trunk. The easiest and quickest way is simply to leave the female connector in the rear seating area and tuck the harness behind the seat and into the trunk, like we're going to show you in a future step. The only downside to this is you will see a couple of feet of wire coming off of the restrictor going behind the seat after the installation is completed. Okay, the second option, which hides the most wire, is to drill a small 1/4-inch hole in the back of this plastic insert that the factory screen normally mounts into. Now, this is not going to be seen, and it's not going to affect the integrity of the installation should you want to go back and use that factory mesh plastic screen. So doing it this way, all you'll see is the small female connector exiting that hole, which plugs into the restrictor part once it is mounted in a future step. Okay, so whether you decide to run the wire on the outside of the panel behind the seat or the inside of the panel and then behind the seat, this is how it's going to route. Okay, first it's going to run along the inside of this wall here, then it's going to go through this panel to the rear seat area and then back down through the hole here. Now there's a couple things you can do at this point to get the wire back into the rear seat area. You can reach into this area here with something and pull it through. If you do that, you can push this small lid forward so that you can reach in and it'll give you better access. Here's a shot with that pushed forward so that you can reach the wire better. Now if you're not able to fish the wire through like we've mentioned, you can pull this panel up just a bit. I would start right here where these arrows are, maybe get a putty knife or something flat to pop it up just a bit. You can disregard this small bracket here, that's not mounted until a future step. Here's a side view of that panel so that you can see how it clips in from the side there. Here's the opposite side so that you can see how that it disconnects from the lower panel. You may not even need to touch this side, you may be able to pry up that back side enough to run the wire. Our goal is not to remove the panel, but to lift it up just enough to be able to access the wire. Okay, so as you're running this wire, the most important thing is that you want it out of the way of the top mechanisms and the levers that move. So preferably along this side wall as far as you can get it, and I would even put some electrical tape on there to hold it against this side wall. Now, in order to access this space inside the panel, your tonneau cover must be raised as we're showing here on the left side, and your top will need to be all the way down. Okay, after the wire is ran down the panel, it's going to exit here under the side panel and come back around and down into this hole. Then you're going to use your coat hanger or your wire fisher to push it down through into the passenger side wheel well area. Here's a couple of different angles of that area. And so right here you'll see the wire pusher at the top going down through the panel into the wheel well area near the carpet. Here's where your wire should be attached. Then you're going to just send that wire down under the carpet into the trunk area. After you're finished with this, snap the rear seat back into place, put your convertible top in the full up position, and unsnap this luggage blockout panel. Okay, at this point the wire that you routed by the wheel well of the passenger side should be placed under the side carpet wall and go down that wall into the bottom of the trunk. You'll now want to remove the carpet panel in the bottom of the trunk so that you can gain access to that fuse panel. Now you can remove the lid off of this fuse panel here. Okay, here's what that fuse panel is going to look like with the lid removed. Here's an illustration. There is another illustration on the inside of the lid that you removed. I do realize that it appears to be upside down here, but this is the way that it's going to be viewed if you're standing behind the trunk. Okay, at this point, if you have the single color illumination, you will have ran this harness through the panel back into the trunk with these two leads, positive and negative, sticking out, and we are now ready to tap into the fuse panel. If you do have the multicolor, stay tuned. We will go over that right after we go over the single color here. If you did order the multicolor, you should now be at the same point in the trunk with the 4-wire harness ran into the trunk instead of this one that has 2 wires on the end. If you got the dimmer remote, it'll come with a box like this, marked clearly with input and output on either side. Go ahead and take the end of the female connector that you just ran through into the trunk and connect the positive wire from that harness to the positive output, and then the negative side to the negative output. Next, you'll want to get the loose wire provided in the dimmer box and connect the positive side to the fuse panel, and then the negative side you're going to ground to the bolt on the trunk latch, which we are going to cover in the following steps. Okay, so this is only if you have the dimmer. We're now going to proceed with connecting the female harness directly to the fuse panel and the ground for those of you that don't have the dimmer or the multicolor unit. Okay, go ahead and grab the end of this harness that you ran through the trim panel into your trunk area, and we're going to separate these 2 wires. One's going to tap into the fuse panel, the other one's going to be grounded under the trunk latch bolt. The wire marked in red is going to be the positive wire. Take that positive wire and strip off about 1 inch on the end of it. Do the same for the opposite wire, but on the negative, strip off about 3 inches instead of 1. Okay, now you're going to get the fuse tap provided in the box. You're going to take the positive wire that you just stripped 1 inch off of, take the end of the wire, the copper part, and fold it over on itself a couple of times. Then you're going to insert it into the end of this blue barrel connector that's on the fuse tap. Okay, now you're going to crimp this blue barrel connector onto the wire using preferably some wire crimpers so that you get the best connection possible. But if you don't have any available, you can use some heavy-duty pliers. You'll need to use a lot of force though to really clamp down good on that wire so that it gets a good connection. Go ahead and pull on the wire a little bit when you're done to make sure that it's a solid connection. Okay, at this point we're going to use our out-of-circuit fuse tap to gain power from this fuse panel, and you're going to remove F33 fuse with the fuse tongs or some needle nose pliers. If for some reason you don't have F33 wireless charger fuse, you can use F19 front seat vent fuse. This is a red 10 amp fuse. We've provided fuses for both scenarios in the box for you. Okay, once you figure out which option you're going with, you're going to want to remove the fuse from the panel and stick that fuse into the empty slot on this piggyback add-a-fuse connector. Now they are pretty difficult to get in. You can use a rubber mallet or just press really hard with your thumb. So here's how it will look using the F33 wireless charger 5 amp yellow fuse, and here's how it's going to look using that F19 red 10 amp fuse. You must have the same color fuses in here, and they must correspond with the F33 or F19 slot. Don't interchange them. Okay, at this point you're going to want to make sure the vehicle is turned off and that the accessory mode is off as well. Now you're going to plug this little piggyback fuse into the slot that you pulled the other fuse out of. Here's an example if you were to use the F33 fuse. You'll notice the wire from the fuse tap is going off to the right side of that fuse panel. Okay, next remove the rear carpet wall. It's held in place with just a few rivets, and use this bolt here on the trunk latch to ground the negative wire. You may have another spot you'd like to ground. That's perfectly fine. The most important thing is that you get a good connection under this bolt so that it's a good solid ground. You may want to use some electrical tape to tape it alongside that wall so that it's not tempted to pull off at any given time. Okay, that should cover the single color wiring. We are going to touch briefly on multicolor wiring before getting into mounting the product. If you do have the single color wiring, you can skip ahead past this next illustration. Okay, here's the multicolor setup. It's important that you only strip off enough wire to place under the receptacle and make a very good connection. However, you don't want any of the frayed wire to back out of the receptacle and touch the neighboring wire. So this side here, which is the input, is going to be for the positive and negative connection coming from the power and ground that we just went over. So you're going to take the loose wire that you had in the box, attach one side to the grounding bolt, run that to the DC negative shown here on the left. Then you're going to take the other wire, place it into the barrel connector of the fuse tap, like we showed in a previous step. Tap it into the fuse that you have, that you choose, and then you're going to run that wire to the DC positive. So again, power and ground go into the input, DC positive and DC negative. Then we get to the output side. You're going to take the harness with 4 wires that you ran through the panel, and the black wire is going to go into the V positive. Very important. Black wire into the V positive. It may have a red mark indicator showing that that is a V positive wire. The solid red is going to go into the R channel, green into the G channel, blue into the B channel. Okay, that concludes the wiring portion of the video. Next we're going to cover the mounting of the restrictor. This next step should be performed at approximate room temperature. While room temperature is optimal, you should be fine anywhere from about 60 to 95 degrees. Okay, grab the alcohol pads provided in the box and clean these trim panels thoroughly. Next we're going to get a cloth or a rag and make sure this area is completely dry. Remove the adhesive protective covers from both brackets. This next step, it will help if you have a partner available, but it's not imperative. Lay the restrictor in place as close as you can get it to this illustration here. After the product is lined up perfectly, place considerable force downward on the mounting feet on each side for approximately 1 minute. When you're applying pressure to the brackets, make sure that you place the force across the entire surface area. This way, every inch of the tape on the underside will be activated and you'll achieve a full bond of the bracket to the vehicle. Okay, that concludes the wiring as well as the mounting. All you'll need to do now is simply plug in the connector that you ran through the panel. You're going to want to wait approximately 72 hours before doing aggressive top-down driving. Now, this is what the 3M manufacturer recommends on their website for the very high bonding tape that we're utilizing on the bottom of the brackets. So the product is easily removed if needed. You are going to want to wait the 72 hours to utilize the quick disconnect though. So if for any reason you do want to remove it after the 72 hours, all you're going to do is loosen the 2 wing nuts on each side, and this bracket here will remain on the vehicle. Then this bracket and the glass will have just enough flex to where you should be able to pry that out just about a ½ inch so that the post will come out of the other bracket and you can remove the product from the vehicle. You will want to do that one side at a time. Okay, that concludes the installation. If you need any assistance whatsoever, jump on live chat on our website, windrestrictor.com, or feel free to give us a call.